Good morning. We continue the review of this conclusion of Hemshech Ayin Beis. We are on page 1413. Finish the paragraph on top of page 1413, Aleph Taf Yud Gimel. What did we learn? That in addition to the Hizbonus of Memaleh, which is contemplating on the divine energy within all of existence, and that's the primary energy, the ikir, not the primary energy, the primary reality, ikiru elakus, that awakens and stimulates an ava, the chuka gdela, that you desire and long to reveal and manifest that revelation, what he calls shuv, hamshacha agilui. So then there's the contemplation on the next level, which he calls the Sovev kalam, how God is beyond existence, godliness beyond existence, and that evokes the exact opposite feeling, a feeling of wanting to be encompassed in that higher reality that's beyond you altogether. What he called b'chol nafshecha, afilu hu neitlas nafshecha, a mesiras nefesh, which is mesiras kol haratzenis, dedicating and giving away, surrendering all your desires, and does not want anything but, even the Giluyim of Elikus doesn't even want a revelation of the divine. Imcha lechafatzdi, but he wants to be licholo b'chinas atzmus erein sof. And when you reach that level, he says that's mamshich from the mazel, from keser, that's higher than the Giluyim. It's mazel from keser, b'shachim b'chinas keser liyas yichud yutke yichud shlim. Yeah. That's Ayidei Mesiras Nefesh or B'chol Nafshecha. It's Yichud Yutke. So let's see here. What else did I want to add? And so how does a neshama reach that level of Sevil Kalam when it's beyond existence? So he said that's possible because the neshamas hem mebchinas atzmus ein sof. The neshamas are rooted in Tehillah law before the tzimtzum, which is kedem alei saratzen, that precedes the desire for even the rising of the rising in the desire for existence, and that's why ken yeshbem hasoged the b'chinas hafla the ein sof. Not only are the neshamas aware of there's a level that's beyond, but they actually have the eifon hafla of the manner of the way it's beyond us, because the neshamas are rooted there, their DNA is rooted there. So when he's mizbein ech she'erin sof muflo muvdal me'elamis, from all the worlds, that's ma'eda this tzemoyin that we said, Elach Hashem nafshi esa, koloyin mamish, which is not a kiruv and isgalus, but one that goes beyond Giluim to be encompassed in the source itself. Okay, that's a summary of what we learned. Now, the next section, before he gets to B'chol Ma'idecha, which is the third level, what he called Atzmus Ein Sof, that's L'mayla Shalamayla Mebchinas Seviv Kalam Memaleh Kalalman. He doesn't get to that till later, 11 pages on. So he's going to discuss now more about this level called Hu. Remember we said Hu of Bez Dine. It began with the Mufla Sheba Sanhedrin, that higher level of Ishen Einai, the pupil of the eye, which was the level of Hu, Hashem, and Bez Dine is Sanhedrin Einei Ha'eda, as like from Moshe was imparted from Moshe Atzilus of the eyes of the people that guide them. That's already as they relate to them. Einei Ha'eda, that relate to the nation, to the people. But Mufla Sheba Sanhedrin is like Hu. So he began. That was the segue on page 1411. From the Hu, he went over to the Mazolis, and from there he went to Hu Neitlas Nafshecha. Hu Neitlas Nafshecha, the Avodah in the level of B'chol Nafshecha. So all that's the level of Hu. So now he's going to elaborate more on this level of Hu, and in the process come and realize and come to understand there's a level even higher than Hu. And that will be the third level, Atzmus Ein Sof, that's higher than Sovev Kalam and Memaleh Kalam, which ultimately joins them together. So that's a summation of what we're going to learn now in the next section. As I said, if it gets a little too dense and a little too, I'd say, distracting because of we need to focus on the matter, on the topic at hand, I will probably just sum it up and rely on the classes that I gave in this section the first time we learned it, which are all available. You can find it all on YouTube and all accessible. So that's the themes of what we're going to learn now. So he says like this. Here also you find one more point before I can learn, is this again where you see in Ayin Beis, the uniqueness of Ayin Beis, where he brings together Maimor of Chassidus from all over and joins them together into one big picture. So the next section is actually based on, if you want to know what it's based on, it's a Maimer V'hu Eivra Lefneim in Eira Teira Vayishlach 884a, where he discusses this at length, and also a Maimer V'hu Avar from the Rebbe Marash, the Rebbe Rashab's father, Tofresh Chav Zayin, in case you want to know the source of the material of what we're going to be learning now. So in addition to helping understand the whole topic, again, it's a type of joining together and integrating Maimor Chassidus from all over. And at the end of the day, Ayin Beis becomes, like you could say, almost a launch pad where you can get to all Chassidus, either directly or indirectly, because Rebbe Rashab really connected so many different themes. And that's only possible in a hemshech of this length. One mimer of 10 pages, for example, you can't do that, really. But here, as we see, it's like a maim she'en lehem sof, a maim amizgabed, Ayin Beis just continues and continues. And we don't even know how much more it would have continued had the Rebbe Rashab continued writing. But we already have over 1,470 pages, something like that. Yeah, 1,477 pages, which the Rebbe Rashab wrote. So with that, let us go now. We'll start the new paragraph on page 1413. And the pages can be found at ayinbeis.com. So here's what he says. Brings a Medrash Rabbah. There's also another beautiful aspect. Everything is grounded in Medrashim, you see, in Zohars, in Emek HaMelech, sources galore. So it's not just ideas, but you have everything grounded and connected to all different parts. Kol HaTeira Kula, really. So the Medrash Rabbah in Parsha Noach says like this. Parsha Lamed Zayin. Chamisha hu. There are 5 times that in the Torah you find the word hu. You're not taking the word hu. Again, remember, hu bezdinei, hu neitles nafshecha, hu is the higher level, what he's calling now, b'chol nafshecha, the second level, Sovev Kalam. Higher than the bezdinei, which would be Memaleh Kalam and Einei Ha'eda as it relates to existence, Malachim, and so on. So Medrash Rabbah says like this. There are 5 places where it says hu l'teva in a positive way, meaning it's used for something positive. And 5, v'chamisha l'ra, and 5 times where it says hu in a negative way. He doesn't enumerate them here. A little later, I think he will. Like, for example, vahi b'mei Achashverosh, hu Achashverosh. That's one of the 5 l'ra. The days of Achashverosh, then it adds hu Achashverosh. And which Achashverosh wasn't exactly a good man. He did some good things, but there the emphasis is on the hu l'ra. Then you have, like by Avram, I think he's going to bring a hu l'mal yus l'teva. So 5 places where hu is used in a positive way, and there are 5 places where it's used in a negative way, l'ra, for something evil or something bad. Amar Abrachia, the Medrash continues, Rabrachia says, B'shem Rabbanon, the Taman Islan Chad Hu Tov Mekulin, that above these 5, above all of them, there's one that's better than them all. So there are 5, the who's are 5 l'teva, and there are 5 the opposite. And then there's Islan Chad Hu Tov Mekulin. And who's that? That who? Hu Hashem Elokeinu b'chol ha'aretz. That's Hashem Elokeinu, who is all over, who the God of the entire earth. Mishpotov Shemidas Rachem of Le'elam. So the pasuk says,
mishpatov.
Right. The pasuk says, "Hu Hashem lekeinu b'chol haaretz mishpatav," over the entire who rules the entire world with his laws. Shemidas racham of le'elam. That's what the Medrash says. Rabrachi says b'shem Rabbanon that his midas racham, his midah of compassion, his attribute of compassion is there forever. So that is a good that's greater than all the other good. So what do we see here? There's a level that's even higher than who. Keep that in mind. That's how he's going to enter into that new place, the third level. But there's a level, 5 levels of who, 5 good, hula teva, there's hula ra, hula teva, and then there's one that's even better than them all, that's the Eibishter. Opirish b'matnis kahuna. Matnis kahuna is a classic commentator on Medrash. What does he say? Mila hu loshen hafloga. That the word who is loshen hafloga. Hafloga means like like a floga is like when you say something is overpouring. Floga is abundance. Say slochadabu mufloga. You should have great and abundant success. So hafloga means whenever it's more than the regular measure. When you say, for example, Memaleh v'gadush, it's spilling over. Hafloga always refers to almost like flooding in a positive way. Hein l'teiv v'hein l'mutav. But it could be both ways. It could be hafloga, an abundance, l'teiv, for good things. Like, for example, when you're blessed with not just what you need, but daiva hesa, but even more, like ashiras, wealth and abundance. But l'mutav can also mean it could be the other way around. You could have an abundance of the opposite of good. Mitchilose vat sefe. Hainu bli shinui klal. In other words, that so this is all the matnas kohuna, that it's so overwhelming, if you wish, or I don't know if that's the right word. Haflog over. There's a word like over when something spills over. There's a word for it in English. It spills over. That's what the word is. Okay. So the matnas kuna means that it's that like for example when you say Vahi b'mei Achashverosh hu Achashverosh, so it says that Achashverosh b'tchilose at sefer he was Achashverosh, the same Achashverosh. So that's in a negative way that he didn't change. So that's for who, in other words, emphasizes when you say Vahi b'mei Achashverosh in the days of Achashverosh. But you say hu Achashverosh, you say no, it wasn't just in the days of Achashverosh. That Achashverosh remained exactly the same Achashverosh throughout, from beginning to end. That's what the Matnas Kuna say. That's in a negative way. But it could also be a who in the positive way, that it's so abundant that it remains consistent throughout. It's a type of, it can sense a certain type of consistency or relentlessness, so it could be in both directions. That's how the Matnas Kuna explains the who. And obviously, Chad hu tov mikulon, there's one that's greater, that's better than all of them, is obviously even a higher level. So the Rebbe Rashab explains, what is this level of who? L'mayla by Hashem. In other words, in Ruchnius. L'mayla, this level that there's who, when you say something is who, that's it, that means it's consistently that way throughout. Hainu b'chinas leishanisi. This is a level of when we say Ani Hashem leishanisi, it's unchangeable, it's unwavering, it's what's the word that we used earlier? Leishanisi. I had a word for it. Shalo yeshum shini klal. There's no change at all. Immutable. That's the word. Immutable. Tahainu b'chinas atzmus ein sof shalamayla mishtalshlus. So this is referring to the core of Eid Ein Sof that's higher than Nishtalshlus. Because in Nishtalshlus we learned there's a shinui, because the Eid Ein Sof is commensurate to, there's no shinui, God forbid, in God, but there's a shinui in the Hashpah that there are different levels. But in Sovev Kalaman we learned there's no Maila Mat, that's an equalizer. So it's the level where you see Begili Leishanisi. Now he hasn't yet here distinguished between the second level and the third level, which we'll discuss. But that's what he's saying. It means what the Matnas Kuna means, Leishanisi. Leishinei klal, loshen haflaga hu. So here right away, hu is referring to a level that's immutable. Shari b'seder ishtalshlus, because in the cosmic order, meaning in the structure of the way God created existence, the whole process, shezeh b'chinas Memaleh kalalmin, that's the level of Memaleh kalalmin, where the divine energy manifests within existence, right? Yes, shinu v'ischalkus madregas. There's a change and a distinction of levels. Okay, he says clearly here. But an Eidin Sof HaSeviv Klam, level of who? Shalamayla Mishtalshlus, Hu Lo Shanisi. I don't know if he means the word who, or he means just that is. It's a level of Lo Shanisi, immutable. Like we say, Ukamoy Kiloi Odam Hu. Interesting, the word who, he's using the word who very deliberately, but it also means Kiloi Odam Hu. He's not an Odam. Meaning li'nochem. The pasuk says, I think it's in Yecheskel, that the Eibush is not a person that you need to comfort. Li'nochem. Which of course is the question at the end of Pasha Bereshis, where God says, Kinechamti ki asisim, I regret of creating the world when I saw how corrupt it became. So the big question is, what do you mean regret? Eibush regrets things? There's no change. That's a whole other discussion. But bottom line is, Kilei Odom hu li'nochem. He's not an Odom, he's not the level of a person, goes through shifts and changes. We have different moods, and our minds can be changed, etc. But the Eibush is the level Kilei Odom hu. Li'nochem shezeh dafke b'chinas Kilei Odom hu. I think he's also emphasizing the word who, but also Lei Odom. He's not, in other words, part of Odom of the Seder Ishtalshlus. In Seder Ishtalshlus, there are shifts and changes and so-called the winds shift. But in Lei Odom hu, there's no change at all. Lei Nochem. Okay. So what we've established is there's 5 levels of who the good, 5 levels of who the negative. That's the level of Leishanisi Sovev Klam, and then there's one good that's even greater than them all. That's Hashem Elokeinu b'chol mishpatav. Hu Hashem Elokeinu, the who of Hashem Elokeinu, which we'll learn a little later what that is, the 3rd level, which would mean even higher than Leishanisi. Now he brings one of the. Okay, let me stop if anybody wants to ask anything before I continue.
I have a question. The Indian of Lo Shanisi, I don't understand how could one ever refer to the Eibishter at a level that's not Lo Shanisi, even Memaleh Kolamim? I mean, we did talk about, maybe it's coming up, where our tefillas and our avodah can affect essentially some kind of shinu. It's not really, it's indirect. It's kind of like, it's a chain reaction. We talked about that a little bit, but Derech Klal in general, you can't change God. And so even in Memaleh Kolamim, why is this level? I mean, in Sovev here, Lo Shanisi, I mean, it's true in Memaleh as well. I mean, other than that exception I made, which is true legamre.
So 2 things. First of all, we're not talking about God, we're talking about godliness, godly energy. God is not discussed altogether. God is Atzmus. That's beyond everything, and it's not in this discussion. This is godly energy. There's 2 types of godly energy, Sovev Kalam and Memaleh Kalam. They're both tracks. And yes, they are subject to many different things. This is part of what God wanted. Just like you say, there's a Ir HaGvul and Ir HaBli Gvul. God in his capacity has the ability to extend and express himself in infinite ways, and the ability to express himself in finite energy. Finite energy, by definition, is subject to changes because, number one, as I said, the Ur that goes into the Keli of Chachma is different than the Ur that goes into the Keli of Bina. The Ur that goes into Daas, that's the Ur, that's God said, this is the energy. And now, firstly, he has the power to create that. Then through the Tzimtzum adjusts, like the Kav, took the Ur Ein Sof that was an infinite light and is now channeling it in a Kav, in a line, and tailoring it to each particular level and elements. So he calls that Shinui Nischalkus. It's not a shinui in God. It's the way the works that it is commensurate to existence. The second point, which you did bring up, is not an aside. That's fundamentally because God wants us to engage with that He wants us to engage, and we actually affect it. So that's why we say Taka the Avodah Hashem reaches that level. He's going to say Malchus. That's the level of Memaleh Kalaman, where Hashem engages with us. Like when we say when we're in pain, God has pain. That we're in Golus, God is in Golus. So obviously we're not talking about Atzmus that's beyond it all. We're talking about the Shchinta Begalusa, that God feels, however you explain how he feels. When we learned this past parsha, Erdana, which we discussed at length, what Atzilus is. Atzilus means God is going away from his so-called aloof state that he's beyond, that Yodua, he knows about, he's known to him, and he wants to know it. So why does he have to go down to see the cry, where the cry of the pain, of the injustice of Zdem is coming? He has to go down. He doesn't know where it is, because there's that level where God, the whole purpose of existence, God wants to engage with us, and we engage with him. So God doesn't need any of that, but he wanted that. In the Sava Kodesh Baruch Hu, he desired to have a dira b'tachtenim, and as such, manifested divine energy in levels that we engage with, and we affect, and it affects us. Obviously, that's the level of Memaleh Kalam. Then he also emanated an energy that's beyond that effect, Sovev Kalam, because he wants us also to have an experience of the divine as it's removed from existence, because that's part of the interface. And ultimately, we want to experience it all. You asked the question about individuality. Individuality, how does that reconcile with becoming one with God? The answer is exactly that, because God created all those elements, the ability for us to be individuals. Through our Avodah, as we refine ourselves, we become kelim, and we refine our containers to be able to receive more till we become one with the teacher, because our minds have gotten to that point where we can become one without losing ourselves. So all that's the process. So there are the levels where the divine engages with existence. There are the levels that the divine is beyond. Engaging with existence is what he's basically the level of shinui. Not about change as we change. For example, it doesn't say God ages. We're not talking about God getting older or being affected by health issues or by parnasa issues. That's not the change we're talking about here. We're talking about change as far as God allowing himself to be godliness manifesting in time and space. Like, for example, do we experience God different on Shabbos than on Sunday? Yes. God be'etzem is all beyond Shabbos and Sunday. But God did create, say in the Torah, there is a Shabbos. Shabbos Kodesh, I'm with you more than I am in a revealed way than I am during the weekdays or on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. So it's not a shinui in God, but it's a shinui in the relationship we have with godliness.
Wonderful. Thank you. That was amazing. Really. Thank you very much. That was really special. Thank you very much.
Okay, good. So that's what the role of Memaleh Kalaman is. That's the level of Yeshinu v'Ischalkus. And then there's Lo Adam Hu. Because you could say, okay, you know what? We have a relationship with God that's engaged like that. So what do we need more? But remember, that's not a full interface. We want to also have a relationship with God as he is in his own domain. And that's higher than Shinui. So basically, it's ultimately, we're going to integrate Leishanisi into a world of Shinui. That even in a world of time and space and all the shifts and hierarchies and structures, we should ultimately experience Bligvul within Gvul, to put it in different words. Like Makam Ha'on, Eina Min Hamida, and the same thing with time. We learned that in time there's also those two elements, like the two levels of vision. Right now, our vision is limited. We only see that far, and we can't see in the dark. But when we can connect that and finally integrate that with Etzem Koyach Hariyah, we're essentially where we can see from one end of the world to the other, if you remember that expression, then ultimately we're bringing the Bligvul of Riyah into the Gvul of Riyah, which is really the joining of Sovev Kalam and Memaleh Kalam. That's ultimately where we're going. But right now, obviously, we're talking about them as two distinct levels. Good. So now he's going to use one example from one of the five toivs. One of the five places that it says hu l'teva is by Avram. So it's actually from 2 weeks ago, from Parsha Lech Lecha. So the pasuk says, "V'zehu gamken Avram hu Avraham." The pasuk says the words Avram. Avram, initially his name was Avram. That is now hu Avram. That's one of the five that the Medrash brings, Hachamisha hu l'teva. So Yetzadik b'tchilosem. What's the meaning of it? Why does it say Avram hu Avram? Why do we need to know that? Like the Matnas Kohen explains, that the hu l'teva, that hu emphasizes that of an immutability, a certain consistency. That hu Avram, meaning mitchilos tzadik, shoyet tzadik mitchilos sevat sefe blishum shinei klal. So when he was Avram, and then when he became Avram, he was always a tzaddik from beginning to end without any change. That's the meaning of Avram hu Avram, according to the Medrash. V'hu al derech masha kosav. This is similar to what it says. Echad hoya Avram. The pasuk says, I think also in Yecheskel, if I recall. Echad Avram was that singular Echad. No one was like Avram. Echad hoya Avram. Avram was a unique individual, exclusive. The Isa b'Medrash Rebbe Noach Parsha Lamed, and the Medrash Rabbe Noach chapter 30 says, Kol mokum shenemer. One second. Kol mokum shenemar. Hoya. Oh, since it says Hoya, Echad Hoya Avram. What's the Hoya? So it says, the Medrash says, everywhere where it says Hoya, it means mitchilosiv at sefer Hoya tzaddik. So the Hoya comes to add that he was not just a tzaddik, he was a tzaddik all the time. And that's the Echad Hoya Avram. Hoya. Consistent. So the Hoya is similar to the Hu, that's what he's saying. That's he's paralleling these two medrashim. Uba Parsha Mikates, he brings now a third medrash. There's Parsha Tzadik, al posek achasi yonosi tamosi. So the pasuk says achasi yonosi, my loved one, beloved one, and tamosi, my twin. Ze Avram. When you say achasi, this achas, this unique one, who's it referring to? That's Avram. Shenemer Echad Hoya Avram. Like it says, Echad Hoya Avram. Avram was that achas, that individual, that unique individual. V'yadua the achasi yenosi, he haveda shalamayim.
Yainasi and Tamasi, it's not a tree. Yainasi is my yoino, my dog.
My dog, but it means my beloved one. Yeah.
My beloved, right? And Tamasi is also my pure, like a Tomim. Not the Oimosi.
I think it says Tamosi to Umosi, no? If I recall. Okay, maybe you're right. Yeah. My complete one, that completes me, like my complement, yeah. That's the Pasuk, the Pasuk? When you say Yonosi, Tamosi?
I think so. That's how I always understood, but now after
I think
you
it's
said
interpreted. Maybe you're right. Maybe that's the Pasuk of Taich, but I think in Medrash he says Tamosi is to Umosi, but maybe not. Yonosi is a yena, is a dove, but
right.
Why does he use the word dove? He means my beloved one, like a dove.
Yeah.
Doves are, their love is also, they're completely forever. When a yena falls in love with his beloved one, they will always be bound together for the forever. Also, nitzchi like this. So 1 second. What's the lesson, Kail Day? It's Kail Day di Defik, where we say there Yenosi, Tamosi, Rayosi. Okay. So now he says, Naveda, what is this level of Achasi Yenosi? Hui Haveda Shalamayla Metam Vedas. Which of course is the level we've been talking about. Who? L'mayla metam v'das, that transcends das. Memaleh Klaman was like das, like b'chol avavcha, eris and kalim. L'mayla metam v'das b'chol nafshecha, like Mesiras Nefesh. So he's saying, hachzi yinosi avedish l'mayla metam v'das, the shishim heima meloches. So the whole passage goes like this. 60 are the queens. Who are they? Shishim mesechtes. They're the 60 tractates of the Talmud, of the Mishnah of the Talmud. We learned that earlier. Kol zeh hu b'chinas chochmah. That's the Talmud Mesechtes is chochmah. The achasi yenosi hu b'chinas reusa deliba. That's higher than chochmah. That's reusa, the desire of the heart, which is an avodah shalamayla b'chinas chochmah. similar to the level of mazel that we've been referring to. Higher than Chachma. V'zeu inyan hu Avram. And that's Echad, Avram, hu Avram, hu Avram. What's the hu? B'chinas keser shebenefesh. What's that in the nefesh? Keser shebenefesh. Shenikra hu loshen nister. That's called hu loshen nister. He's now connecting the hu to the word nister, which means in the third person, you speak about someone. Ato is in the second person. I see you. Loshen noichach. You're present. Hu, him, referring to something that's beyond, which is loshen nister, like we learned earlier. First, he said it was bina that leads us to keser, the real alma diskasi loshen nister. And this is also al derech she'amar Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai. We find Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai said before he passed away, "Eini yedei be'ezeh derech malichin esei." So he was saying, I don't know where are they taking me? Where will my neshama end up going? So of course the obvious question is, what does that mean? Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai, a person who didn't stop learning Torah all his life, a pasuk pum megirsa, etc., etc. What does it mean? Any day I don't know which path they're taking me to. He doesn't know he's going to Gan Eden. So the Mavur b'Mokam Achar, why did he say that? Because it's not any idea, because he's reaching a level of Memaleh Matam V'das. Shenikra, he says again, Mavur Machshadam Pnei Shemuchusa Neshama Ef Shalahasig Ki L'Memaleh Min Hadas V'Aseichel. Because he was talking about the Mehusa Neshama, the essence, the real personality of the soul, not as it manifests below in Chachma and so on. That you could understand. That's Chachma, that's Seichel. But the Mehusa Neshama, you cannot comprehend because it's higher than Das and Seichel. So when Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai said, Eini Yedeya, he didn't mean Eini Yedeya, I don't know, as I'm ignorant. Eini Yedeya, because it's a level that's beyond Das. V'zeu shekosav lo yedaiti nafshi. That's the level. He's bringing the They see the Rebbe Rashab is pouring on a whole bunch of different ideas, but all connecting it together that we're this level of who, L'Memaleh Matam V'das, lo yedaiti nafshi. What does that mean? That my soul lo yedaiti. What does lo yedaiti mean? Shesherish haneshama hi bebchinas lo yedaiti. The root of the soul is a level of lo yedaiti higher than das. Hainu L'Memaleh Mahadas. Like we say, Mashiach ba behesach hadas. Mashiach will come not unknowing, so to speak, surprise. So this explains. Behesach hadas doesn't mean that, like, you'll be surprised because you didn't know. Because it means it's coming from a level that's higher than a logical process. So what's the story with Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai? Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai, Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai mesupak. He was in doubt. He knew about his Avodah, what he was aware of in Yediyah, that he knew. What he did not know was about whether his Avodah was complete on that level of Musa Neshama, because it's higher than Das. And that's why it's called hu. It's loshen nister. It's concealed. It's covered up. There's the Avodah of the core of the soul. The level of achasi yenosi. There's only one yena, only one dove, only one beloved. That's the level we're talking about here. And one more line we'll read before I stop for questions. And through that, himshich, when you go to that place and you say lo yadaiti, you reach that level of Avodah where you're focusing on the level of Mehusa Neshama that's higher than Das. Through that, his himshich transmits the level of Eidin Sof HaSevev Kalam. The level of Aniyah violation Nisi, where it manifests this immutability of the divine, Shehu b'shava mitchilose v'atzeife, that is equal from beginning to end, b'li shini v'yischalkus klal. So you're drawing now the level of Sevel Kalam that is not subject to the changes and the shifts of Seder Ishtalshlus, without any shift or any change or any and distinction at all. That's what this Avodah does. So simply put, when you're doing Avodah al Pitam V'das, So it's just a simple example. You're learning Torah. So each of us have a different level of seichel, of intelligence, a different level of knowledge. So obviously, when one of us learns, it's going to be different than a other person. Everyone based on their level. There's chalkos. Comes Simchas Torah, we wrap up the Sefer Torah, and everybody dances equally with it. A Talmud Chacham, the greatest Talmud Chacham, with the simplest Jew, who may not even know Aleph Beis. Everybody's dancing with the same Torah. So how does that reconcile? Because there's the Giluyim of Torah, or Neshama if you wish, where there's distinctions, one Neshama to the other, and then there's a point where we reach Muhusa Neshama, where everybody's equalized, and also on the level of Torah. The connection is not through your knowledge. There's of course differences. Two deeply people. Some people belong in this class, some in another class, simply because that's their level of where they are. So Avodah Pitam Daas, we need to have distinctions. We need both. If you only have the etzem and neshama, but then it's not realistic also on your personal level. You want to integrate it to where you are. On the other hand, you don't want to just be limited to your level. You also want to connect it to Sovev Klam. So basically, like Simchas Torah, in this mashal would be the experience of Sovev Klam, which is actually Hakafas, Makif, which is Sovev. And when you learn Torah, it's more the experience of Torah Memaleh Kalam. The same thing with Neshamas. The Neshama says they are Ata Barasa, Ata Yitzarta, Ata Nefachta Bi. And different Neshamas, we know there are different levels. The level of Moshe's reign is Neshama, the level of the Sanhedrin, the level of other people, Reshechim, Shiftechem, the leaders, all the way to Chet Veitzecha, V'Shev Memecha, the wood choppers. There are distinctions. There's Kehanim, Levim, Yisraelim, and in that many, many levels, Yisachar, Zvulim. And we want to have that because God created distinction and diversity, and He wants there in Tachtenim, Loshen Rabim, Tachtenim, down below, in the plural, the multitudes, there should be this an entire world of diversity, and that's where He wants you to be Mamshech Achdus, Achasi, the unity that comes from Sovev Kalam, that equalizer, the Loishanisi and Blis Chalkus should come into a world of Shinui and Ischalkus. That's essentially what he's saying here. And in Avodah, it's the Avodah al Pitam V'das, Avodah l'mayla Mitam V'das, which Rabbi Yechim ben Zakkai was accessing when he said Eini Yadeya, Lo Yadaiti, all these levels. Ru'usa Deliba gave us a lot of different words and language here, a lot of terms and levels, but they essentially go all into this category of l'mayla Mitam V'das, Sovev Kalalman. So even though he says Etzem HaNeshama, you could, of course, ask, one second, isn't there a higher level than that? There is. We'll get to that. That's the Tov Mikulim. That's going to be the third level of Atzmus Ein Sof, Ein Sof, that's higher than Sovev Memaleh. But as I said earlier, when you talk in general, you can speak about Sovev in context of Memaleh Kalam, and you sometimes say Atzmus Ein Sof, you say Atzmus Etzma Neshama. You say Chaya Yechida, sometimes they're bundled together, but when you break it down, Chaya is Arich and Yechida is Atik. But both are Keser. So here he's not distinguishing right now yet. We will distinguish. He did clearly say there's a third level. Just want to point that out in this context here. Okay, so we have now this contrast, Sovev and Memaleh. Good. Any questions? Let's stop for questions. I think it's very clear and quite beautiful, all coming together. Tell you, I remember when we learned it the first time I felt I didn't see all the connections, to be honest, as I'm seeing them now. Now that we learned it this way, especially if we're learning it in context of the bigger picture, I think it's a lot clearer. I'm just saying from my own experience right now. I remember the first time we learned it, I was a little more, I almost felt that, like I was wondering why the Rebbe Rashav is bringing all of this, but now it's pretty clear. It really solidifies everything we've been learning in real, more Avodah terms. Remember, he did begin by saying, let's learn this idea in Avodah, and now the Avodah is coming apparent with Avodah l'mayla Mitam V'das. Just a footnote, some of my own feelings on the matter. Anybody, or should we continue? He says now, like he's going to connect yet to another. A lot of connections going on here. So, which is really good because if you learn some of these ideas elsewhere, in other places, in other Maimorim, it's nice to see how it all comes together here. I mean, I count here at least 7 different midrashim and subjects all coming. Very nice. V'yesh leimer, the Rebbe Rashab continues, and we can say that this is also the inyan in another medrash. This medrash is quite popular in Chabad circles today, because connected to the Maimer Basa Legani, famous Basa Legani, the last Maimer of the Frierdiker Rebbe, the first Maimer of the Rebbe, and the Maimer every year, Yud Shvat, which we learn chapter after chapter. So he says, V'yesh leimer, you can say, Shezehu inyan, this is the inyan, the Issa b'Medrash Rabbah, Shir HaShirim. So the Rebbe Rashab is really pouring on the Midrashim here. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 5 Midrashim so far. So it says, b'Medrash Rabbah Shir HaShirim, al the Pasuk, Basa Legani. So the Medrash Rabbah in Shir HaShirim says on the Pasuk, Basa Legani, come to my garden. So the Medrash says, Lignuni. Doesn't say Legan, it doesn't say, it doesn't say Lignuni, it's Legani Lignuni. It doesn't say Gan, it says Gani. Don't come to the garden, come to my garden. Gnuni is a bridal chamber. Why? L'mokim shoya ikri betchila. Come to the place where my primary presence was there in the beginning, meaning in the beginning of creation. The ikar shchina betachtenim haisa. That when Hashem created the world, before Chet Daas, where was the ikar shchina, the primary shchina? Where did it reside? Where did it dwell? Betachtenim. And then v'zayin deiris shechatu gormu silu kashchina. And then the 7 generations that sinned, starting with Chet Daas, the sin of the tree of knowledge, then the next generation, for 7 generations, each generation caused a siluk, and you could say basically a concealment of the Shekhinah. Like he says, the Shekhinah went from Ores Tachtenim to Rekia, the first heaven, and then the next generation of sins, the second heaven, third, all the way to the 7th heaven. And then the process reversed. After these 7 generations, just for the record, the Mishnah says that 10 generations, Machisin Uboin, 10 generations from Adam to Noach, were all transgressors. And that's when the Mabel came. And then comes the 10 generations from Noach to Avram. So I think the Rebbe explains in some of the Basa Legani Maimorim, definitely in some places, that the fact the Medrash says 7 is because it's talking in more general terms. The truth is, it was 20 generations from Avram from Adam till Avram, but 7 generations and in general those go into 7, which is the 7 generations of sins. Then came va'achar kach omdu zayin tzadikim. Then arose 7 righteous ones, starting with Avram Avinu, v'hiridu v'himshichu, and they drew down and they transmitted downward the Shekhinah back down to Tachtenim. V'Avram hirida mirkia hazayin, and the Medrash continues, says Avram took it from the 7th heaven to the 6th, Yitzchak from the 6th to the 5th. I'm just spelling it out. Yaakov from the 5th to the 4th, and then the Shvatim or Levi and Amram, and finally Moshe, the 7th generation from Avram. Let's say Levi Kahos, and then Amram, and then Moshe, the 7th generation from Avram, brought the Shekhinah back down below, which is Hashem said, I will dwell among you, Shachanti, Shekhinah. It returned the Shekhinah to the way it was before the Chet Daas, after Matan Torah, when they built the Mishkan. Now, unfortunately, of course, the Chet HaEgel and the sin of the golden calf and then subsequent problems returned some of the, we'll call toxins of the Chet Daas. Until Mashiach comes, we will not have a permanent Beis Hamikdash. So that's just the bigger picture. And that, of course, is the whole theme of the Maimer Basa Legani. How do we bring the Shekhinah back, in the fullest sense of the word, through our Avodah, through Karbonis, and so on, as he discusses in the Maimer at length. We're up to the Ein Sof, Lamai Lamai Aden Ketz, Mata Mata Aden Tachlus, which is definitely connected to everything we're learning here, the interface. So he's connecting what we just learned with this Medrash in Shir HaShirim Rabba, Shir HaShirim. And what's the connection? So, first of all, we see Avram Avinu, Echad Avram, the role of Avram in all of this. But what's the connection to the deeper topic of Ani Hashem Leishanisi and all this process? So he says like this, Umavur b'mokem acher. Skipped a lot. Explained elsewhere, the Gili HaShchina b'Beis HaMikdash, the revelation of the Shechina in the Holy Temple, Hu Gili b'chinas Pnimi Shem Havaya, is the revelation of the inner dimension of Shem Havaya, v'hainu hagili d'b'chinas Gimel Rishenis, which is the Gili of the Gimel Rishenis, the first three, which is usually Keser, Chachma, Bina, like we say about Kodesh HaKadoshim, those three. So we see here that the Gili HaShechina that Moshe concluded with, and the way it was in the beginning of creation, and that Avram began the process, is Amshacha of something that's higher than just the Giluyim of Memaleh Kalam. It's all the way Gimel Rishenis. Ukiyadua, just want to see how much to read here. Well, you know what, let me just sum up, I'll say it orally, and tomorrow we'll learn it inside. It's going to basically continue to explain that the Beis HaMikdash is a Gili of Keser, down below. That was there in the beginning of creation. It then got concealed. Avram, and it's going to say Avram, who Avram, with a Hey, is the Gili of the Hey of Hashem. So Avram began the process of bringing it down, and then its conclusion is with Moshe, the Mishkan, and then later in the Beis HaMikdash. So basically, he's connecting everything we learned with Avraham, who Avram, the same Avram. Chilosavat Sefer is drawing down the Shechina from the highest levels down below, but he doesn't finish the process, obviously. The process is finished in the seventh generation with Moshe. That's what he's going to be discussing in the next section, Avram's role in all of this, and what Echad HaYavram is. And saying Echad, Achas Yenosi, like he said, is the level of Memaleh Matam V'das, Keser, being drawn down into the world of Shinui and Ischalkus, which is not Achas. Achas, Echad, is oneness, unity. And that unity is being brought down into diversity where there is Shinui and Ischalkus. So that's where he's going with all of this. But we'll stop here. I'll stop for any questions. And as I said, we'll learn it all inside the next classes. Okay. Floor is yours. Anybody wants to ask anything? Any questions? Any comments? Yeah, very nice.
So just in regarding to yesterday's chidas and what I posted about nafshecha, Rashi saying it's your ratzon, that's also part of Keser, right? And could you see a connection?
I don't do so much processing as I said, so maybe. I'm not going to negate possibility. I didn't really look into it. But if there's some similarities, it's very possible. Do you like to make the connection just a connection, or does it add, in your mind, understanding of what we're learning here?
What we said was b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, and b'chol ma'odecha. So ma'odecha is your etzem. Nafshecha, we said, was
Sovev Kalam.
right, and Memaleh. So Sovev Kalam, does that have? Yeah, I guess it does have to do with Keser, because it's
Sovev Kalam is
Keser.
Keser, that's for sure. He said that clearly. Yes, Sovev Kalam is Keser in this context, for sure. Yeah. He said clearly, Keser is a word that he's using here. He used it more than once.
So it's nice to see that it does correlate, that Ratzon is Keser.
As I said, Ratzon is generally the level of Keser, correct?
Rabbi Jacobson, if we if Rabbi Rashab already deduced that the Bechol Nafshecha is the Mesirat Nefesh, that's the Avodah, then what would be the Avodah of Me'odecha? You know what I'm saying?
As I said, that'll be explained in 10 pages from now.
Okay.
11 pages, on page 1424. He's
Okay.
going to go back and explain B'chol Moedecha.
Okay.
So we'll get there. Yeah, 1424 is going to talk about that. You can peek ahead if you like, but that's where it is.
He says at the end of what we just learned, and it's out of context. Honestly, I'll be candid. I didn't follow every aspect of this, but I mean, in general, Bichlal, yes. But the idea of that the B'chinas of Pnimi Hashem Havaya we're talking about here is still Sovev, but I would have thought that the Pnimius of Shem Havaya is Atzmos.
Well, obviously you thought wrong.
Well,
But
what aspect of Shem, or I guess
when we get there, we'll learn it.
Atzmos is above Havaya?
You could say that.
I was surprised to hear that there's a deeper level than Atmos.
There is no deeper level than Atzmus. I said Atzmus can mean, in very general terms, can refer to anything above Memaleh Kalalman. But when you break it down, he did break it down. He said, look, I've explained this a number of times. He said, at the bottom of 1411, yes, Gimel Madregas Klolas Balakus, Bechinas Memaleh Kalalman, V'Sevev Kalalman, V'Atzmus Ein Sof Shalamayla Mechinas Sevev Kalalman, V'Memaleh Kalalman. But then you see he interchanges and uses Atzmus Ein Sof a few times on Sovev. So I explained, in Chassidus, this is common. Sometimes Etzem HaNeshama is referred to Chaya and Yechida, that there's 4 levels of the soul. And sometimes we break it down to Chaya and Yechida. Keser is one general level, but Keser has Arich and Atik in it. It all comes down to how much you're breaking it down and how much in general terms. There's no word that you can just lock in. There's no black and white here at all. Even Atzmus Ein Sof, we sometimes refer to Atzmus even higher than Ein Sof. Ein Tchila, you may have heard, learned in some Maimorim. In Teres Shalom, the Rebbe Rashab says when we talk about Atzmus, we generally mean Atzmus Ha'oir. So it all comes down, but it's semantics. It ultimately means, what are you referring to? So when someone asks me, what is Atzmus? I say, you tell me, what are you referring to? Which level are you referring to?
Like the ultimate, God himself,
there's no
not
one
before,
word,
nothing.
There's no one word no, Atzmus Ein Sof can mean many things. It's too broad of a term. It's like saying godliness. Godliness, what's godliness? There's so many levels of godliness.
Is Atmos always comes with the word Ein Sof after it? Isn't there just
not
Atmos?
Always. No. Sometimes Chassidus asks, why does it say Ein Sof? Why doesn't it say Ein Tchila, which is even bigger than Ein Sof? Ein Sof. Chassidus says, has no end, but it has a beginning. Atzmus doesn't have a beginning either. So why doesn't it say Ein Tchila? Anyway, I'm just giving you a short synopsis, but it's not, expressions are it's all language, especially when it comes to Chassidus. There's no thing it's human language that's very limited, and we're only using words because we have no choice. We have to use words, but it's not, talking about Ischalkus and Shinui, it's not like salt and pepper, or like in your cupboard, that you have a shelf for one thing, a shelf for another. We don't have that in Ruchnius. In Ruchnius, there are no shelves, and there's no space and time are far more sublime and far more abstract, especially when you go into levels that we're talking here. So when we say Memaleh, Sovev, and Atzmus Ein Sof, those are 3 levels. In general terms, Atzmus Ein Sof can also be used at Sovev. He used it. If you look in the beginning of the paragraph on 1412, he said, the ha'ara of Memaleh comes be'ein arech legaba Atzmus Ein Sof, and a few lines later he says Sovev. So it's all relative and all depending on context. Yeah. Remember, you mentioned about Pnimi Hashem Havaya. Havaya is a name. As soon as you're dealing with a name, you're already dealing with some definition. You may recall we learned about Shmoy Hakol Batzmuse. It doesn't have a name. It even says in the Zohar that Anoichi is higher than Havaya because Anoichi no letter and not even a point can capture it. So as soon as you say a name, even a Havaya, which is Shema Etzem, and the highest name, there's firstly names that sometimes are higher, like Eya or Anoichi, and then there's levels that are completely beyond the name. There's Havaya that's Eisius altogether. The Shalot talks about it, Chassidus talks about it. So everything is ultimately relative. Yeah.
Speaking of Avraham Avinu, he said Anochi Afa ve'efer, and I always thought it was strange that he would use the word Anochi.
Yeah, it's a different discussion, not relevant really here. Okay, so let's stop here. We'll stop about 2/3 or 3/4 of the way down on page 1413.